Step into an old stone house on a scorching afternoon, and something unsettling happens. The world outside blazes with heat, yet the moment you cross the threshold, the air shifts, it softens, it cools. It wraps around you with a quiet steadiness that feels almost unnatural, as if the walls themselves are exhaling a long, patient breath. Travelers have described this feeling for centuries, noting how these ancient dwellings seem to hold their own climate, sealed away from the fever of the sun. Nothing hums, nothing clicks, nothing burns electricity. The house simply remains cool, as though time has gifted it a private refuge. And while you stand there, letting the chill seep slowly into your skin, you cannot help comparing it to the apartment you left earlier in the day. Thin walls heating like metal plates, stale air clinging to glass surfaces, every room turning into a fragile box straining against the weight of summer. Modern spaces promise comfort, yet so often fail to deliver it. They trap heat the way a jar traps steam, while these older structures, raised without machines or calculations, seem to obey some forgotten law of nature. It is easy to imagine the builders shaping each stone with quiet certainty, knowing how the house would feel long after they were gone. Perhaps they understood something we no longer study, something that lived not in textbooks, but in observation, patience, and the long memory of the land. The coolness inside these walls feels deliberate, almost intelligent, as if the house learned how to guard itself against the sun and never forgot the lesson. As you stand in that dim interior, listening to the muffled world outside, a strange thought settles in. If this house can stay calm in such heat, what else did its makers know? What principles guided their hands? What secrets did they build into the foundations, hidden in plain sight, while our modern designs overlooked them? The question lingers in the stillness, quiet but insistent, pull you deeper into the mystery. Something about this coolness does not feel accidental. And as we continue, we begin to ask whether ancient builders acted on intuition, or whether their decisions reveal a deeper, intentional design waiting to be uncovered. In that lingering question lies the doorway to everything that follows, inviting us to search for forgotten truths hidden within the cool silence of ancient stone. On a typical summer morning, a modern apartment begins to warm long before anyone wakes. Sunlight hits the concrete shell, and the building drinks in the heat with startling eagerness. The walls, thin and eager to react, pass that warmth inward like a whisper that becomes a shout. By noon, the rooms hold a faint heaviness, a quiet warning of what is still to come. Even with blinds drawn, the air grows thicker, as if the heat has found a way inside that no curtain can stop. And once it settles, it refuses to leave. Walk through the narrow hallways of a city building, and you feel the same trapped warmth following you. Each apartment stacked tightly against another, offering little space for breeze or shadow. Windows open only a fraction, more symbolic than useful, while interior layouts twist air into dead ends. The home becomes a sealed chamber where warm air rises, lingers, and gathers strength. Residents often blame the weather, but the truth lies deeper, stitched into the very structure around them. These buildings were shaped by priorities that had little to do with human comfort. Developers favored speed, repetition, and cost-efficient materials that responded quickly to the sun's touch. Architects leaned toward sharp lines and glass facades that looked impressive, but behaved poorly under heat. Insulation meant for cold seasons locked warmth inside through the summer. Every decision, made for practicality or style, nudged the home further from natural comfort. Without meaning to, we created dwellings that work against the body's quiet need for coolness. It is a strange irony. With more technology than any generation before us, we rely on machines to cool spaces that could have been naturally comfortable. Air conditioners labor day and night to correct what design ignored, their steady hum becoming the soundtrack of modern living. Yet the heat always returns, waiting for the moment the machine stops, ready to reclaim the rooms with familiar weight. As this pattern becomes clear, a question rises in the warm stillness. Why did older homes, built with simple tools and slower methods, avoid these problems so effortlessly? What guiding principles allowed them to defy the sun while our modern dwellings surrender so quickly? The contrast opens a quiet doorway to the past, inviting us to look back at builders who shaped homes with patience, observation, and a different understanding of comfort. An understanding we may need to rediscover. Across the world, old stone houses stand with a quiet confidence, as though they know something we once understood and then misplaced. Their walls are thick, their openings narrow, their courtyards arranged with an almost mathematical calm. What seems rustic at first glance begins to reveal patterns, recurring shapes, repeating alignments, small choices made with surprising precision. When viewed closely, these buildings stop looking accidental. They feel deliberate, shaped by minds that studied their surroundings long before blueprints were ever drawn. In remote mountain villages, desert towns, and coastal settlements, the same ideas surface again and again, as if scattered civilizations followed a shared whisper. Thick masonry faces the sun in specific directions. Windows appear exactly where shadows fall longest. Courtyards sit in places where wind slips through most gently. It is difficult to believe these similarities emerged by chance, yet there is no evidence of global exchange guiding them, no ancient council teaching builders across continents how to tame the heat. Instead, the knowledge seems to rise from the ground itself, carried through generations that watched the seasons with patient attention. Their solutions were etched into stone, repeated until they became instinct. Modern eyes often miss this quiet intelligence. We pass these houses during travels or see them in photographs, admiring their charm, without noticing the logic embedded in every line. But once you start looking, the clues multiply, hinting that these old structures hold more understanding than they willingly reveal. Consider the thickness of the walls, seeming excessive, until you realize they regulate temperature with a patience no modern material can match. Notice the deep-set windows that pull light in softly, but keep heat at bay. Even the way rooms connect feels intentional, guiding air with a gentle hand. None of this is random. None of it is decorative alone. These homes behave like silent machines built to cooperate with their environment, long before comfort became something handled by electricity. Yet most people walk past these buildings without sensing the depth of knowledge resting inside them. Their mystery hides in daylight, revealed only to those who pause long enough to listen. Each stone carries a fragment of an older language, one that speaks softly about balance, climate, and survival. And as we step toward the next question, how these builders understood such comfort so deeply, the feeling grows that the answers have been waiting quietly in the shadows all this time. Long before architects sketched lines on parchment, builders learned to read the world with their hands. At dawn, they would walk the land in silence, feeling the direction of the wind by the way it brushed across their skin, studying how the first light touched different surfaces. They noticed which stones stayed cool after a long night, and which ones warmed too quickly under the rising sun. They watched how shadows crawled across the ground through the seasons, marking invisible patterns that later guided the placement of walls, windows, and courtyards. Nothing was written, yet everything was recorded in memory. These early craftsmen trusted observation more than theory. Over decades, they gathered knowledge the way the earth gathers layers of soil, slowly, steadily, with purpose. A builder might test a stone by pressing it to his cheek, sensing the temperature it held. Another would tap blocks together, listening for a resonance that hinted at strength. Apprentices learned not from diagrams but from repetition, inheriting a lineage of trial and refinement that stretched farther back than anyone could name. Every structure carried the imprint of countless experiments, successful and failed, absorbed into the next attempt. It is tempting to think of these builders as simply practical workers, improvising solutions without scientific understanding. Yet, the deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that their methods formed a quiet, empirical science. They mapped wind corridors by watching smoke drift from cooking fires. They tracked moisture by studying which soils cracked under heat and which remained firm. They placed foundations where the earth felt least restless, trusting instincts sharpened by decades of close attention. Without formulas, they discovered patterns our modern textbooks now confirm. What sets their knowledge apart is its intimacy. Their research happened outdoors, under shifting skies, in direct conversation with climate and terrain. They learned through touch, sound, and rhythm, shaping homes that cooperated with their surroundings instead of resisting them. To call their work guesswork is to overlook the precision born from generations of observation woven into craft. As we move forward, it becomes natural to ask what these builders understood about the materials they relied on. If their methods were this refined, what secrets lay within the stones themselves, waiting to be noticed? In the quiet shift between craft and intuition, their work hints at deeper principles, urging us to look closer at the stone's silent conversation with heat itself. Stone behaves in a way that feels almost alive, responding to heat with a patience our modern materials lack. When sunlight strikes a stone wall, the warmth does not rush inward. Instead, the surface accepts it slowly, letting the heat seep through layer by layer, as if the wall is considering whether to allow it entry. Midday intensity barely reaches the interior because the mass of the stone holds the heat at its outer edges. It moves inward like a traveler on a long, winding path, taking hours to arrive. By the time it finally approaches the inner rooms, the world outside has already begun to cool, and the stone, sensing the change, releases the stored warmth back into the evening air. In this way, stone becomes a quiet negotiator between the sun and the home. It smooths extremes, softens transitions, and keeps the indoors steady while the outdoors shifts from blazing to breezy. Rather than resisting heat, it choreographs its movement, slowing it until the day's intensity loses its edge. This is why ancient homes feel balanced even in harsh climates. The stone moderates temperature like a natural rhythm, maintaining comfort without effort or machinery. You can imagine heat traveling through a stone wall the way a distant message moves across old trade routes, delayed, softened, changed by the journey. It never arrives with the strength it began with. Instead, it appears gently, long after the sun has passed. Modern walls, thin and reactive, offer no such delay, letting heat burst through in a single sharp wave. Stone, by contrast, acts like a deep reservoir of time, always interacting with the environment, but never rushing to match it. For builders of the past, this behavior was not a mystery. They watched how stone stayed cool through long mornings and held warmth through chilly nights. They learned to trust its slow dialogue with the climate, shaping their homes around that dependable rhythm. When you stand inside one of these structures, the steadiness you feel is not accidental. It is the product of a material working with the world rather than against it. Understanding this is the first step toward appreciating why ancient walls were shaped, layered, and positioned so precisely. Their builders recognized that stone's strength was not only in its stability, but in the quiet way it controlled heat's passage. And through that control, the home remained calm through seasons. To the builders of old, a wall was never merely a barrier. It was a tool, shaped with intention, placed with care, and given a purpose far beyond holding a roof in place. Thick stone walls rose like silent guardians, slowing the sun's advance and creating a cool interior even when the world outside blazed. Their mass absorbed light without surrendering it, turning the harsh glare of day into a muted warmth that would never reach the heart of the home. These walls were not simply thick for strength, they were thick for strategy. The shape of each wall mattered just as much. Corners were angled to break the wind, not trap it. Surfaces were set in ways that allowed shadows to gather where they were most needed. Deep window recesses acted like miniature caves, shielding interiors from direct sunlight while letting soft light slip through. The air inside these cavities cooled before entering the room, as if the window itself were filtering the heat from the day. Even the thickness around the openings changed how breezes moved, guiding them gently rather than forcing them to rush. Overhangs and ledges played their part as well. They cast deliberate lines of shade that drifted across the walls as the sun traveled, offering protection during the hottest hours and allowing controlled warmth later in the day. The house became a living sundial, reading the sky and responding through its shifting shadows. Nothing was accidental. Every protrusion and recess formed part of an ancient cooling script. When viewed through modern eyes, these choices can seem decorative, even quaint. Yet behind their beauty lies careful calculation. Old builders understood that comfort depended not on fighting the climate, but on cooperating with it. Their walls carried knowledge of winds, seasons, and solar angles, creating a passive system that required no energy and produced a stable, refreshing calm. Standing before such a home today, one can feel a quiet intelligence in its form. It invites curiosity, hinting that much of its comfort comes not from what is seen, but from what is shaped into its very bones. And just as these walls guided light and warmth, they also guided the air itself, drawing us naturally toward the question of how ancient builders mastered airflow with equal precision. Their methods invite us to look deeper, sensing that every choice held purpose shaped by centuries of close observation itself. In old homes, air was treated not as an afterthought, but as a welcomed guest. Builders shaped openings and passages with the quiet intention of guiding its movement, knowing that a well-placed breeze could cool a room more effectively than any effort to seal it off. They understood that air preferred to travel through difference, entering where it was cooler, leaving where it was warmer, so they offered it these contrasts with thoughtful design. A window on one side of the house called to a door on the other, creating a gentle pull that swept heat outward and carried freshness inward. High ceilings lifted warm air away from the living spaces below, letting it gather harmlessly near the roof, where it could drift out through vents or clerestory windows. The cooler air that replaced it moved like a slow tide, calming the interior. Even the narrow alleys between houses served a purpose. They funneled breezes towards courtyards and shaded rooms, allowing wind to slip through the home the way water finds its path downhill. Nothing was forced. The house persuaded the air, nudging it along routes shaped by centuries of observation. When you imagine the breeze as a traveler, the home becomes its landscape. A slit window offers a quiet invitation. A shaded corridor becomes a road, a courtyard, a resting place before the journey continues. In summer, these pathways carried away trapped heat, while in the evenings, they drew in cool air from the settling world outside. The result was a continuous exchange, subtle yet powerful, that kept the home breathing in rhythm with the environment. Modern apartments, sealed tightly against the outdoors, have lost this relationship. Their windows open too little or too late. Their corridors lack alignment. Their ceilings hover low, compressing the air rather than guiding it. The wind has nowhere to go, and so it simply stays outside, leaving the rooms inside to grow heavy and static. The harmony once shared between walls and breeze has been replaced by mechanical struggle. But in the old homes, air was an architect in its own right. It shaped how spaces were arranged, how rooms were connected, how voids were carved into solid stone. As we step into the next chapter, this understanding becomes the foundation for seeing how entire landscapes, hills, valleys, and coastlines once worked together with these structures to create environments that felt effortlessly cool. Long before maps were drawn or property lines existed, builders walked the land with a kind of listening. They studied the curves of hills, the quiet bend of valleys, and the hidden paths where wind drifted like a wandering spirit. Villages did not appear at random. They unfolded where the land offered comfort. You can imagine an ancient builder standing on a slope at dusk, sensing how the cooling air slid downward, settling softly into the lower fields. He would note where the breeze carried the scent of water, where the soil stayed damp longest, and where the sun lingered too heavily. These observations shaped the first decisions, long before a single stone was lifted. Homes nestled against hillsides were not tucked there for charm. The earth behind them served as insulation, keeping the interior cool during the hottest months and shielding it from harsh winds. In river valleys, houses faced the direction of prevailing breezes, so the wind could sweep through courtyards and shaded rooms. Even the choice of building materials reflected a dialogue with place. Stone drawn from the surrounding hills, clay gathered where the river left it smooth, timber cut from forests that knew the same climate as the homes they would form. To an ancient builder, the land was not merely ground to build on. It was the first architect, offering suggestions through its slopes, textures, and temperatures. The terrain revealed where shadows would fall longest, how the sun arced across seasons, and where summer heat would linger stubbornly. Rather than forcing structures into shapes that defied these truths, builders followed them. Their homes became extensions of the environment, stone shapes rising out of the earth as naturally as trees growing toward light. Walking through an old settlement today, you can feel the intelligence in its placement. Houses tilt slightly toward breezes, avoiding sun-struck exposures. Narrow passages channel wind, while broader terraces absorb cooler evening air. The landscape and the architecture seem to breathe together, each shaping the other over time. There is no sense of struggle, only cooperation. This harmony reveals a striking contrast to modern planning, where buildings often ignore the land's cues. Yet, in the past, climate's comfort began with orientation and sunlight, with understanding how the world moved around the home. That quiet partnership sets the stage for the next question. Once builders listened to the land, how did they align their homes with the sun's shifting path to deepen this natural balance? To ancient builders, the sun was not a distant presence, but a clock, a compass, and a quiet teacher. They watched its path day after day, noticing how its angles softened in winter and sharpened in summer, how it rose gently in the east and descended with fierce intensity in the west. They learned to read its movement the way others read tides or seasons. When the time came to place a home, they did not begin with walls or foundations. They began with the sun's slow arc across the sky. Positioning a house toward the east invited the first light of morning, warm enough to stir the day, but not strong enough to overheat stone. The western face, where the afternoon sun burned longest, was often minimized or shielded behind trees, courtyards, or neighboring buildings. Roofs angled themselves to deflect the harshest rays, allowing interior spaces to remain calm through hours when the outside world shimmered with heat. Even window openings followed this ancient choreography, capturing light when it was soft and denying it when it became sharp. Courtyards sat where shadows could stretch across them at just the right times, creating pockets of cool air that refreshed the home as breezes wandered through. Builders paid attention to how light entered these spaces throughout the year, adjusting heights and alignments so the sun warmed the courtyard in winter, yet retreated during summer's peak. Every choice, height, direction, and recess, formed a dialogue with sunlight's predictable rhythm. This wasn't luck, it wasn't rough estimation, it was survival shaped into architecture. Where modern buildings often fight against the sun with tinted glass and mechanical cooling, ancient homes formed partnerships with it. They anticipated heat before it arrived, designed escape routes for warmth before it accumulated, and welcomed gentle light while rejecting the harsh. Their resilience came not from resisting the environment, but from understanding it without hurry. When you stand in an old stone village and feel how evenly the air moves, how naturally the rooms remain temperate, you begin to sense this silent alignment. The builders seem to know exactly where every shadow would fall, where each sunbeam would enter, and how each room would feel as the day unfolded. And as their mastery becomes clearer, another layer of mystery emerges. The way they used those shifting shadows to carve out cool zones, shaping comfort not only through direction, but through darkness and light itself. Shade was once treated with the same respect we now reserve for technology. It was more than darkness. It was a living refuge that softened heat, guarded stone, and shaped the rhythm of every home. Ancient builders understood that the sun's power could be softened not only by thick walls or perfect orientation, but by thoughtfully placing structures where shadows would gather like cool pools of air. A house rarely stood alone. It leaned into its neighbors, borrowing their shade and offering some in return, forming narrow corridors where the heat of the day hesitated to enter. Imagine walking through an old village at noon. The world outside blazes, the sky trembles with brightness, yet the alleyways remain calm. Shadows fall in layered patterns across the ground, each one a fragment of a larger design. Trees rise beside courtyards, their branches positioned so that their shade extends across stone surfaces during the most unforgiving hours. Overhangs stretch outward like quiet guardians, blocking sunlight before it reaches the heart of a home. The shade they cast is not heavy or oppressive. It carries a subtle chill, the kind that settles along your arms and tells you the builders knew exactly what they were doing. Courtyards serve as hidden sanctuaries, surrounded by high walls that direct sunlight with careful precision. Light enters softly in early morning, then slips away as the sun climbs. By afternoon, these courtyards become oases where families rest, where breezes slow, where the stone beneath your feet remains cool despite the heat swirling above. The temperature difference feels almost magical until you realize it is the result of small, deliberate choices repeated across generations. Even entire neighborhoods were shaped for shade. Houses positioned close together created networks of protection, keeping streets dim and walkable even in the height of summer. Walls rose just high enough to block direct rays, but not so high that air stopped flowing. Shade became a communal resource, shared by all who passed through it. Modern cities have forgotten this art. Streets widen, buildings stand apart, and open courtyards vanish beneath concrete. Yet in the old world, shade was crafted with intention. It was not leftover darkness. It was the first line of defense against the sun. From this understanding of shadows, another secret begins to emerge. The way water and moisture wove themselves into these shaded spaces, deepening the coolness until the air itself seemed transformed. Water has always moved quietly, shaping comfort in ways most people never noticed. In old settlements, its presence was never incidental. Homes clustered near rivers, not only for drinking or farming, but because flowing water created a gentler climate around them. Wells sat at the center of courtyards, like silent reservoirs of coolness, lowering the temperature of the air above them in subtle, almost invisible ways. The surface of the water breathed moisture into the space, softening the heat and giving courtyards a calm, refreshing stillness, even in the height of summer. At night, stone floors absorbed traces of moisture from the cooling air. By dawn, when the first light touched them, droplets of dew clung to their surfaces. As the day began, this thin film evaporated slowly, pulling heat from the stone and leaving the interior cooler than it had been moments before. It was a small, daily miracle. Stone collecting the night's coolness, water releasing it back into the air. The two working in harmony, without effort or design, more complex than nature's own rhythm. Even underground water influenced these early homes. Builders sensed where the earth held hidden veins of moisture, choosing sites that stayed cooler because the ground beneath them never fully dried. In some regions, channels carrying water beneath courtyards created temperature gradients that encouraged breezes to drift downward, carrying cool air into shaded rooms. No machinery, no devices, just the patient push and pull of evaporation and mass. Within these environments, water shaped microclimates delicate enough to feel unreal to modern sensibilities. Step into an ancient courtyard at midday, and you might notice how the air there feels denser, cooler, almost tactile. The stone under your feet has a faint dampness left from the night, cooling the space long after the sun has risen. The relationship between water and stone becomes unmistakable. Stone stores the coolness, water unlocks it. Their partnership wove comfort into spaces that would otherwise have surrendered to the sun. Modern apartments rarely experience this quiet interplay. Floors sealed with synthetic materials reject moisture, and air-conditioned rooms dry the environment until it feels detached from natural rhythms. Yet, in the old world, water was an unspoken architect, always working, always moderating. And now, as we understand how land, sun, shade, and water shaped comfort, another layer emerges: the people themselves, whose daily habits completed the ancient cooling system. In old stone homes, people did not simply reside within the walls. They moved with them, breathed with them, and treated the house as a living companion rather than a fixed container. Each day followed a quiet choreography shaped by the climate. At dawn, shutters opened to welcome the cool morning air, allowing the freshness of the night to sweep through rooms before the sun gathered its strength. Doors facing prevailing breezes were unlatched first, guiding currents through shaded corridors while the world outside was still gentle. Courtyards, still holding traces of nighttime calm, became places to sit, to work, to begin the day in the presence of slow, drifting coolness. As the sun climbed, the rhythm shifted. Windows on the bright side of the house were closed or shaded, not in hurried reaction, but with practiced timing passed through generations. Light continued to enter, softened by deep recesses and angled openings, but heat was held at bay. Thick stone floors, cool from the night's embrace, kept rooms temperate long after noon, and families moved naturally toward the spaces that felt most comfortable. Some rooms were morning rooms, others belonged to the afternoon, and the home encouraged this natural migration. By evening, the balance changed again. Terraces offered a place for warm air to rise and escape into the open sky. High openings near the roof were unlatched, so accumulated heat could drift upward and vanish. Families gathered in courtyards where the air, freshly cooled by shade and stone, settled softly around them. Nights were often spent in spaces chosen not for furniture, but for temperature, sometimes even on rooftop platforms designed to catch the faintest night breeze. Every action was small, yet each one fit into a system that made the house feel alive. Modern life rarely follows such rhythms. Apartments remain sealed for convenience, windows stay closed for noise, and shutters, when they exist at all, serve decoration more than function. Comfort is expected to appear automatically, without movement or ritual. But in abandoning these daily interactions, many homes lose the chance to breathe. Heat gathers, lingers, and deepens, unchallenged by the simple habits that once kept dwellings cool without effort. In the old world, comfort was a partnership. The house offered its design, the people offered their participation. Together they shaped a climate that felt natural and steady. And as this dance unfolds, it leads us toward the next layer of ancient living, the subtle rituals that transformed airflow, temperature, and space into something almost artful. In the ancient world, comfort was never automatic. It was choreographed, a series of small, deliberate movements that worked in harmony with the environment. The first action each morning was a quiet ritual, passed down through generations. The opening of doors and windows, timed to catch the morning breeze before the heat of the day arrived. The cool air, still holding the remnants of night, slipped through the house, guided by the careful arrangement of entrances and exits. A window opened on one side, a door cracked on the other, and the house filled with a gentle current that swept the warm air out, leaving only cool, breathable freshness in its wake. As the sun climbed higher, the rhythm shifted. Heavy shutters were closed, and curtains pulled tight. The house, now a quiet sanctuary, sheltered itself from the harsh midday light. The warmth of the sun, unrelenting at noon, was blocked not with technology, but with simple human intervention. These subtle actions weren't haphazard. They were the family's understanding of how heat moved, how sunlight struck, and how air traveled. The house worked with the natural flow, following the day's rhythm with intention, ensuring that the coolness of dawn remained long into the afternoon. When evening arrived and the sun began to dip, the cooling ritual continued. The windows, once shut to protect from the afternoon heat, were reopened, but this time the air was no longer a simple breeze. It was the cool exhale of the earth, a reward for a day of careful planning. Warm indoor air, accumulated in the afternoon stillness, was allowed to escape through open windows or onto terraces. The heat from within released into the night, and the house grew cooler as it breathed freely once again. Even the act of sleeping was part of this strategy. In summer, the coolness of night was embraced fully. Rooftop terraces, often designed with an awareness of the evening breeze, provided a space where families could sleep under the stars, their bodies cooled by natural ventilation. This was not luxury, it was necessity, part of the rhythm that governed life in the stone house. In modern homes, we've abandoned these rhythms. Sealed off and air-conditioned, we no longer open doors to the wind or close shutters to protect from the sun. Our climate control is mechanical, and we've forgotten how to participate in our own comfort. But in the past, the home was a living, breathing entity, shaped by every movement of its inhabitants. And as we look deeper into the ways social structure intertwined with the design of the home, we find that every action, every cooling ritual, was part of a grander strategy, a strategy where the home was always in sync with the world around it. In ancient villages, the architecture didn't just house families, it housed an entire ecosystem of comfort, where the design of each structure, the arrangement of each street, and even the placement of public spaces worked together to keep the temperature steady and livable. These were not isolated homes, but collective environments where the very layout of the settlement contributed to the cooling of the whole. In these places, heat didn't settle in pockets, it was distributed, shared, and minimized across the village. The homes themselves were compact, built close together with shared stone walls. These walls, far from being a barrier, acted as thermal buffers, absorbing and dissipating heat in unison. The warmth that seeped into one home at midday slowly passed through to the next, allowing the temperature inside to remain balanced, while the outside world, with its blazing sun, was kept at bay. As the sun set, the walls, which had absorbed heat during the day, slowly released it, evening out the temperature for the community as a whole. Narrow alleys, winding like quiet rivers between homes, served as wind tunnels. These pathways channeled breezes through the village, drawing cool air through courtyards and across rooftops. The clustered homes, angled in such a way that no one building blocked the airflow, created a network of cooling channels that spread across the settlement. These alleys, though humble in appearance, were designed to amplify the breeze, funneling it deeper into the heart of the community. The air didn't just circulate around one home, it moved through the entire village, cooling public spaces, communal areas, and private residences alike. The concept was simple, but profound. The village didn't live separately, it cooled together. The design of the entire settlement created a microclimate, where the collective response to sunlight, wind, and shade worked to maintain comfort. In this way, the villagers lived in symbiosis with their surroundings, creating a space that was not just shelter, but a sustainable, naturally cooled environment. Modern cities have lost this cooperative wisdom. High-rises stand apart, isolated from one another with little consideration for the temperature effects of their design. Public spaces no longer cool the air, but trap it, and the sense of communal comfort has been replaced by mechanical solutions. In ancient villages, the home was never a solitary endeavor. It was part of a living, breathing community that shared not just space but climate. This cooperative comfort, a product of design, not just social structure, lays the foundation for understanding how these environments affected the psychological experience of living in them, offering a calm and consistent refuge from the heat. In ancient stone homes, coolness was more than just a physical state. It was a psychological balm, a feeling that wrapped around the body as much as it did the mind. The moment you entered, the sensory experience began to change. The acoustics of the space were different, softer, quieter, the sharp edges of noise dulled by thick walls and rounded corners. The air was not dry or oppressive, but rather held a calm, steady coolness, a stillness that seemed to seep into every corner of the home. Even the light that filtered through the windows was gentle, dimmed by the thick stone walls and the strategic placement of deep recesses. Shadows stretched across rooms in slow, deliberate patterns, shifting with the day's movement, but never too abruptly. It's not hard to imagine how these sensory details created a sense of peace. The stone walls, often textured with age and wear, didn't just cool the body. They created an environment that felt grounded and stable. The very surfaces you touched invited calm, their coolness registering not just as a relief from heat, but as a signal to your body that everything was in its proper place. The rhythm of coolness, stable temperatures, and soft light patterns told the mind that it was safe, that the environment was in harmony with the human experience. In these homes, the body didn't have to fight the heat. It could relax, absorb the environment, and simply exist. Modern apartments, in contrast, often do the opposite. Reflective surfaces bounce light and sound around, creating noise and sharp, intrusive light that can overstimulate the senses. The heat in modern homes fluctuates, peaking during the day and dropping at night, causing stress as the body's natural rhythms try to adjust. The lack of tactile connection with the environment, walls that are cold, shiny, or flat, only amplifies this discomfort. It's a cycle that modern architecture often fails to break, leading to a heightened sense of unease, a mental restlessness that mirrors the physical discomfort caused by fluctuating temperatures. The ancient design of stone homes worked differently. The temperature may have been controlled passively, but the comfort of the space extended beyond physical temperature. It reached into the psyche, creating a space that allowed the mind to rest. It was a holistic approach to comfort, one that acknowledged that mental well-being was just as important as physical comfort. As we move toward real-world examples of stone cooling mastery, the question becomes, how can we harness this deep, natural comfort in today's world, where mental and physical well-being often seem at odds with modern living? In the Mediterranean, stone houses do not merely sit on hillsides, they appear to cling to them, their thick walls holding tight to the land as if rooted by the very earth beneath them. The warmth of summer, relentless and unyielding, presses down on the villages, but the homes, crafted from limestone, marble, and volcanic rock, stand like silent sentinels against it. These stones, cool to the touch even under the midday sun, absorb and store the heat, then release it gradually, never allowing the interior to become suffocating. The streets, narrow and winding, form natural tunnels of shade, with the high stone buildings casting long shadows that stretch across the cobblestones. This arrangement is no accident. It is a finely tuned system designed to protect residents from the harsh heat that rules the region for much of the year. Whitewashed walls, a signature of Mediterranean towns, reflect the intense sun, preventing it from penetrating too deeply into homes. And as the day stretches toward its peak, the houses begin to breathe. The thick walls cool the air inside, offering refuge from the scorching temperatures outside. Inside, the heat of the world is muted, a quiet siesta under the shadowed roof. Cicadas hum, but the air remains still, serene, untouched by the heat that rages beyond the stone. This design wasn't born out of luxury, but necessity. The struggle to survive in a land where heat shaped every aspect of life. The cooling strategies of these villages were not born of indulgence, but of a deep understanding, passed down through generations and etched into the very fabric of their buildings. The beauty of these ancient villages lies not only in their aesthetic charm, but in the centuries of experimentation they embody. Each stone laid, each wall positioned, was part of an evolving conversation with the climate, an effort to survive and thrive under the harshest of conditions. These homes were not just shelter, they were tools, carefully crafted to fight the sun with the materials the earth provided. And just as Mediterranean builders mastered this balance, other civilizations in more extreme climates, like deserts, pushed the art of cooling even further, evolving even more ingenious ways to deal with heat. The next chapter invites us to look closer at their strategies. In the scorching deserts of the Middle East, where the sun beats relentlessly down on the earth and the air shimmers with heat, Ancient architects crafted homes that defied the very climate that threatened them. These were not simply homes, they were marvels of ingenuity, designed to combat temperatures that modern cities would deem unlivable. Mud brick fortresses rose from the desert floor, their thick walls acting as buffers against the heat. But these homes didn't just endure the heat, they outsmarted it. Towering wind catchers, tall structures that resembled ancient chimneys, captured the faintest breeze and channeled it down into homes below. These towers weren't decorative, they were cooling machines, designed to catch winds from the most favorable directions and bring them into the heart of the home. As hot air rose, the cooler breeze would replace it, circulating air through courtyards and rooms in a continuous natural flow. Further below, stone-lined underground cooling tunnels, known as kanats, carried water across vast distances, cooling the air as it traveled. As this water made its way through the earth, it created a subterranean coolness that found its way into homes. Rooms built above these channels stayed cooler as the earth's natural temperature moderated the air, while the thick stone walls held that coolness inside. In the evening, when the sun dipped and the temperature dropped, the stone courtyards, absorbing the day's heat, released it back into the night air, turning these spaces into heat sinks that gradually cooled the homes. The twist? These ingenious designs achieved the same cooling effect we rely on air conditioning for today, without burning a single watt of electricity. In fact, some ancient desert homes achieved indoor temperatures cooler than many contemporary apartments. Modern air conditioning systems, by comparison, seem primitive in their reliance on constant power, while these ancient systems worked in perfect harmony with nature, using nothing more than wind, water, and earth to cool entire communities. This quiet brilliance shows how ancient civilizations turned an unforgiving climate into a place of comfort, creating spaces where people could sleep under the stars without feeling the weight of the day's heat. As we continue to explore these architectural feats, it becomes clear that ancient design, much like the stone it relied on, was not just about survival. It was about creating lasting harmony with the environment. From the deserts, we now turn to colder climates, where stone again proves its versatility, adapting to an entirely different challenge. In the high, wind-swept peaks of the Alps, the rugged foothills of the Andes, and the distant heights of the Himalayas, stone houses tell a different story than those built in the sun-soaked plains or deserts below. Here, stone doesn't simply block the heat, it holds the cold. In these mountainous regions, where the air is crisp and temperatures can plummet overnight, the thick stone walls of homes act as natural refrigerators, storing the coolness of winter long after the snow has melted. Imagine stepping into one of these stone homes at the break of day. The early morning is still chilly, the sun not yet strong enough to penetrate the thick walls. As you walk across the stone floor, there's a familiar, frost-like coolness that lingers in the air, even though the outside world is warming. These floors, which absorb the night's cold, continue to hold that temperature well into the afternoon, keeping the indoor environment refreshingly cool. The stone walls, by now heated slightly by the sun's rays, have resisted the warmth from creeping too far inside, creating a pleasant balance that offers refuge from the outside world's temperature fluctuations. In the mountains, thermal mass behaves in a way that might surprise those accustomed to hot climates. Instead of storing and releasing heat, as in Mediterranean homes, the stone here acts like a time capsule, preserving the coolness of the earth. As the seasons change, these homes remain steady, unaffected by the swift swings in temperature that cities below might endure. Even in summer, when the sun reaches its highest point, the interior temperature of these stone homes remains comfortable, cool and even, never breaking a rhythm set long before the sun's rays began to warm the land. The stone's cooling effect isn't limited to the hottest months. It interacts with the climate over long periods, its ability to store cold proving just as useful as its ability to release warmth. The stone's slow response to temperature changes makes it a marvel of passive climate control. It doesn't rush to warm up or cool down. It follows the rhythms of nature, changing gradually, without the sudden fluctuations of modern living. Some homes, in the quietest corners of the world, carry winter inside them long into the summer, a testament to the enduring strength of stone. And while these ancient homes offer shelter from the cold, they also remind us that stone is not just a passive material. Its interaction with the environment is active and deliberate, crafted over generations to master the delicate balance of thermal comfort. As we move forward, the comparison of ancient solutions across cultures reveals universal principles that allowed these civilizations to thrive in their diverse climates. Across the world, from the sun-baked streets of Mediterranean villages to the chilly stone houses tucked into the high mountains, a striking pattern emerges. Ancient builders, separated by vast oceans and centuries of time, seem to arrive at nearly identical solutions for keeping their homes cool. In the deserts, wind catchers towered above fortresses, capturing every passing breeze. In the Mediterranean, thick stone walls shaded courtyards, reflecting the harsh sun away and offering shelter from the heat. In the high Andes and Himalayas, homes remained cool through summers by storing the winter's chill in thick stone walls. Across these diverse landscapes, one design principle dominated: understanding how air, water, and stone interacted to create comfort. Whether it was the deliberate alignment of homes with prevailing winds, the use of thermal mass to store heat or cold, or the creation of shaded courtyards that invited cool air and protected from harsh sun, these ancient societies all developed similar strategies, without ever having communicated with one another. The realization is nothing short of astonishing. Societies thousands of miles apart, each operating in radically different climates, arrived at almost identical solutions for one of humanity's oldest problems: how to stay comfortable in an often unforgiving environment. This global convergence of architectural wisdom speaks to something deeply universal. These builders didn't have access to the tools we have today, yet they observed their environments with an intensity and patience that allowed them to unlock natural processes with remarkable precision. They didn't simply rely on materials. They learned to shape the environment itself, bending it to their will through clever use of local resources. Stone, wood, and earth became not just structural elements, but tools of climate control. But as the centuries passed, a shift began to occur. Modern construction, driven by industrialization and new materials, began to move away from these ancient techniques. The rise of glass, steel, and concrete marked a new era of architectural innovation, but also one that increasingly ignored natural cooling strategies. The focus turned away from adapting to the environment and toward controlling it through mechanical means. Why did we abandon these time-tested principles? The answer, it seems, lies in the Industrial Revolution, a time when rapid urbanization and technological advancement redefined how we built. As we move forward, the contrast becomes clear. While ancient civilizations harmonized with their surroundings, modern buildings increasingly fight against them, relying on artificial solutions to solve what nature had already provided answers for. The next chapter explores how these new materials changed everything, altering not only our architecture, but our relationship with the environment itself. There was a time when architecture and climate were inseparable. The walls of homes rose to embrace the winds, and roofs were angled to shield against the harshest sun. But something changed as the world began to urbanize rapidly, and the connection between buildings and their environment began to fray. The shift was subtle at first. New materials emerged, faster methods of construction gained favor, and building design started to focus on efficiency. No longer did the climate guide the hand of the builder. Now, speed and cost were the primary concerns. Glass, steel, and concrete began to dominate city skylines. These materials were not chosen for comfort. They were chosen because they were cheaper, faster, and easier to mass produce. They allowed buildings to rise quickly, meet growing demands, and maximize available space. But in the process, they cut ties with the natural environment. No longer did buildings open themselves to the sun's warmth or seek out cooling breezes. Instead, they became sealed environments dependent on artificial systems to manage temperature, light, and air quality. This shift marked a profound change in how we lived. As we embraced mechanical cooling, air conditioners, fans, and sealed windows, we unknowingly turned our backs on the natural methods that had once allowed us to live in harmony with the climate. Ancient wisdom about passive cooling, stone walls that absorbed the day's heat and released it at night, windows placed to catch the breeze, was cast aside in favor of artificial solutions. The pursuit of comfort became detached from nature's rhythms, and in the process something was lost. It wasn't that we forgot how to cool ourselves naturally, we abandoned it. We moved into a new era of convenience, where climate control came at the flip of a switch, and the very idea of designing a home to naturally adapt to the weather seemed quaint, almost irrelevant. Yet as modern buildings grew more insulated, more airtight, the comfort they promised became fleeting. We realized too late that we had traded one form of stability for another, one that, in the end, depended entirely on systems that were as fragile as the buildings they inhabited. This historical pivot opened the door to a new way of thinking about buildings and climate. As we explore the materials that now define our homes, we begin to see the stark contrast between ancient methods and modern practices. What were the true costs of turning away from nature's quiet solutions? And how did modern construction materials, so widely adopted, alter our relationship with the very environment that sustains us? Section 2. Concrete, one of the most commonly used materials in modern construction, is often hailed for its strength and versatility. Yet, when it comes to regulating temperature, concrete can be a silent antagonist, particularly in the summer months. Unlike stone, which absorbs heat slowly and releases it gradually, concrete behaves much differently. It absorbs heat quickly, almost eagerly, and then releases it just as fast, turning a once comfortable room into a sweltering oven as the day wears on. Imagine the scene. Sunlight pours down, striking the concrete slab of your floor or the exterior wall. Within moments, the heat begins to penetrate, seeping into the concrete like a sponge soaking up water. As the temperature rises, the concrete stores that energy, its surface growing warmer, while the room's atmosphere begins to shift. The air feels heavier, the warmth creeping slowly but steadily, until it becomes impossible to escape. By midday, the heat inside is no longer just a passing inconvenience, it's suffocating. Rooms that were once pleasant now feel more like heat traps, the walls themselves radiating the warmth they've stored. The emotional discomfort that accompanies this heat surge is palpable. It's not just physical heat, it's a sensation of being trapped, like the walls are closing in. Air conditioning may offer temporary relief, but the cycle persists. In fact, it becomes worse as the day goes on. The concrete, having absorbed and held on to the sun's energy all day, continues to radiate it long into the evening, keeping temperatures uncomfortably high. But here's the twist. Concrete isn't inherently bad. It's an incredibly versatile material, used for everything from highways to skyscrapers. The issue isn't with concrete itself, it's with how it's used, particularly in buildings where climate considerations are overlooked. When concrete is employed without regard to its thermal behavior, it becomes a heat magnet, amplifying the sun's mood swings rather than regulating them. In the next section, we'll explore how modern apartment designs exacerbate this problem, where insulation choices and airtight construction trap heat, leaving the once promising promise of comfort behind. The question remains, why did we move away from the wisdom of ancient design? And how did we allow our homes to become so disconnected from the natural world's rhythms? Modern apartments, with their sleek, airtight designs and energy-efficient materials, are often sold as the pinnacle of comfort. Yet, for all their promises of warmth in winter, they have a hidden flaw. They trap heat during the summer. The insulation designed to keep warmth inside during cold months does its job too well, preventing the heat from escaping when temperatures rise. In fact, these modern spaces often behave more like sealed boxes than homes, with the heat accumulating inside, unable to find its way out. The problem starts with insulation, specifically, insulation designed for cold climates. In regions where winters are harsh, thick layers of insulation are needed to keep the warmth in. But in warmer months, these same materials create an unintended effect. They prevent cool air from entering and heat from leaving. When combined with double-glazed windows, designed to keep the cold out in the winter, they create a sealed environment that simply cannot breathe. The home becomes a closed jar, and as the sun beats down, the air inside grows warmer and warmer, with no natural way to expel the heat. What's even more surprising is the paradox of modern, energy-efficient design. These homes, built with the best intentions to conserve energy, unintentionally worsen summer discomfort. The same materials that keep the cold out in winter trap the heat in summer, creating an environment where air conditioning becomes the only solution. These homes are not designed to adapt to the rhythms of the seasons. They are designed to keep the temperature constant, regardless of the outside environment. While this may be ideal for the winter months, it's a nightmare when the sun comes out. The revelation is stark. Modern design logic, which prioritizes winter performance and energy efficiency, often leads to uncomfortable, sweltering interiors in the summer. This disconnect from the natural climate leaves many residents struggling to find relief, despite their supposedly efficient living spaces. As we move forward, it becomes clear that the solution to this problem isn't in continuing to seal ourselves off from the world outside. Rather, it lies in learning to embrace natural cooling again. But as the reliance on air conditioning grows, we find ourselves increasingly dependent on artificial systems. The question now is, can we break free from this cycle, or has the modern home become a prisoner of its own design? Air conditioning, the modern solution to sweltering heat, is often regarded as the ultimate comfort in today's homes. But does it truly solve the problem of heat, or does it simply mask it, hiding deeper architectural flaws? As the cool air flows into our living rooms, it's easy to forget that behind every gust of artificial breeze lies a larger issue that's being ignored: poor design. AC does nothing to address the fundamental problem, it only covers it up. When we turn on our air conditioners, we're not solving the source of the heat, we're simply hiding it from view. The warm air trapped by poorly designed homes, sealed windows, inadequate ventilation, and thick concrete walls is pushed out by AC units, but it doesn't vanish. Instead, it is expelled into the outside environment, contributing to what's known as the urban heat island effect. This process of cooling indoors, while dumping heat outside, raises the overall temperature of our cities, creating a vicious cycle. As more air conditioners are used, the more heat is generated, which leads to more people turning on their air conditioning. It becomes a feedback loop, demanding more and more energy to keep up with the rising temperatures, while the underlying issue of design remains unaddressed. Now, here's the twist. Ancient homes didn't need air conditioning, not because the climate was inherently cooler, but because their designs didn't allow heat to accumulate in the first place. The thick stone walls, strategic shading, and natural airflow mechanisms of these homes kept indoor temperatures balanced without the need for artificial cooling. These homes were built with the environment in mind, actively avoiding heat buildup through thoughtful design. It's not that these ancient builders were luckier with the weather, they were simply smarter with their materials and their placement. This realization brings us back to the heart of the mystery. Modern homes, with all their technological advances, fail to outperform these ancient designs. They rely on external systems to correct internal problems, while the timeless wisdom of natural cooling has been forgotten. As we continue our exploration, the question becomes, how can we reconnect with this ancient knowledge and design our living spaces to work with, rather than against, the environment? The answer may hold the key to solving our modern climate discomforts. Heat behaves differently in a stone home. It doesn't rush or surge or overwhelm. Instead, it drifts inward with the patience of something passing through a dense, ancient forest. Every inch of stone slows its progress, softening its edges, taming its intensity. The sun may blaze outside, filling the world with sharp, shimmering heat. Yet inside these walls, warmth arrives as if moving in slow motion. It lingers at the surface, hesitating before traveling deeper, taking hours to cover distances that modern materials let it cross in moments. This delay is the secret: thermal mass, expressed not through equations or diagrams, but through rhythm. When the sun reaches its peak, the stone still feels cool, as though untouched. Only much later, when the air outside begins to cool, does the stored warmth begin to migrate inward, weakened from its journey. By the time it arrives, the interior no longer needs protection from the sun's intensity. The heat becomes gentle, almost comforting, dissipating without disturbing the home's calm. It's a natural choreography that once shaped daily life. The house remains steady, even as the environment shifted wildly. Morning chill, midday blaze, evening breeze. Within these walls, temperatures rose and fell with a grace so subtle it went unnoticed. Residents didn't need machines to regulate their comfort. The stone did the work, holding the day at arm's length. Imagine watching heat enter the wall like a traveler walking a long woodland path, weaving between trunks, slowing its stride, pausing in shaded clearings. It never arrives with the force it had at the journey's start. Instead, it comes softened by time. Modern materials, thin and reactive, offer no such refuge. They let the heat rush straight in, turning rooms into ovens before a person can react. But stone understands patience. This slow dance between heat and mass is a forgotten marvel, a quiet science embedded in ancient homes long before the term thermal mass existed. Builders didn't need formulas, they observed. They learned that thick walls created stability, that comfort came not from blocking heat completely, but from delaying it. And as day fades into night, another transformation begins. The same stone that slowed the sun's warmth now reaches for the coolness that settles over the land, preparing for the next cycle in this timeless rhythm, one where nighttime becomes an ally in the home's quest to remain calm. When the sun finally slips beyond the horizon, a stone house enters its second life. The warmth it absorbed during the day begins to drift outward, rising gently from the walls like a long exhale. The air cools, the world quiets, and the home engages in a nightly ritual as old as its foundations. This is when the true magic happens. Night becomes a healer, and the house, which spent the day protecting its inhabitants from the sun's intensity, now prepares itself for the next cycle by releasing the remnants of heat still held within its thick walls. As the darkness deepens, cool air settles over the land, moving softly across stone surfaces. Windows once kept shut against the sun are opened to invite the night breeze inside. The house breathes in. The coolness seeps into the stone, sinking deeper as the hours pass, resetting the entire structure. By dawn, the walls have regained the chill of early morning, ready to hold it long after the world brightens again. To live inside such a home is to witness a quiet rhythm, heat and coolness trading places like tides. A surprising truth emerges. Without this nightly reset, stone walls would fail. If the heat of the day could not escape into the night, the stone would warm little by little until it became a burden instead of a blessing. Ancient builders understood this, not through instruments, but through attention. They aligned windows to catch night breezes, designed courtyards that collected coolness after dusk, and organized daily life around the idea that evenings were not the end of the day's work, but the beginning of the next day's comfort. Night cooling was not accidental. It was the cornerstone of the home's climate system. The thick walls held heat only long enough for the evening air to reclaim it. The floors, cool to the touch at dawn, were evidence of hours of quiet absorption. Everything worked in slow harmony with nature's rhythm, each day a mirror of the one before, each night a chance for the house to heal itself. And as the home recharged under the stars, another force prepared to guide the coming day: air. Moving silently through corridors and openings, shaping comfort as invisibly as the night shaped coolness, airflow became the next architect in the ancient design. In ancient homes, air was not left to wander freely. It was guided with intention, coaxed along invisible pathways carved into the very structure of the building. The old builders understood something modern design often forgets. For air to move, it needs both a place to enter and a place to escape. Without this balance, the atmosphere becomes stagnant, heavy, unmoving. But when the pathways are shaped correctly, air becomes a guest that slips through the home with grace, refreshing every corner without force. Cross breezes were the first tool in this quiet art. Builders placed openings on opposite sides of a room, knowing that even the faintest breeze would travel through one window and out the other, carrying warmth away as it passed. The movement was slow, but deliberate, a gentle drift that cooled spaces without stirring discomfort. These breezes didn't rush. They wandered, exploring each room before finding their exit. Staggered openings added another layer of control. A low window allowed cooler air to enter, hugging the floor as it spread. A higher opening, perhaps near the ceiling or tucked beneath the eaves, provided an escape route for warm air rising naturally. The house became a breathing organism, inhaling through the shaded lower vents, exhaling through the high ones where sunlight pressed hardest. Builders didn't need to understand thermodynamics. They read the patterns of wind the way farmers read seasons. Pressure differences did the rest. Narrow alleyways compressed wind, funneling it toward courtyard entrances. Open terraces acted like lungs, drawing in fresh air when warm currents rose from the rooms below. Even interior walls shaped airflow, creating subtle channels that encouraged movement from one space to the next. Every doorway, every recess, every arch played a role in guiding air's invisible journey. Today, many homes have forgotten this logic, Windows open in the wrong direction, or worse, not at all. Ventilation becomes a mechanical effort rather than a natural one. The air has nowhere to go, so it stays, growing warmer, heavier, more stale with each hour. The ancients knew better. They treated air as an essential element of design, shaping its pathways as carefully as they shaped the walls themselves. And while air moved silently through these old spaces, sunlight played its own role in the house's comfort, another quiet force, guided and softened with equal intention. For ancient builders, sunlight was more than a source of illumination. It was a substance to be shaped, directed, softened, and sometimes denied. They treated light with the same care a sculptor gives to clay, understanding that every ray carried both warmth and brightness. Too much of it could overwhelm a home, too little could leave it cold and dim. The solution lay not in avoiding sunlight, but in mastering it. Deep-set windows were their first tools. These openings, carved into thick stone walls, acted like long tunnels that filtered the sun's intensity. By the time light reached the interior, it had softened into a gentle glow, stripped of its harshest heat. These windows didn't simply let sunlight in, they refined it. In summer, the depth of the walls kept direct rays out, preserving the coolness within. In winter, when the sun arced lower across the sky, the same openings allowed warmth to penetrate deeper, offering comfort in the cold months. Angled openings played a different role. Builders placed them with precision, aligning them with the seasonal paths of the sun. Light entered when it was wanted, warming specific rooms at specific times, and stayed outside when the heat of the day became too harsh. A single shift in angle meant the difference between a room bathed in pleasant morning light and one scorched by afternoon glare. The house read the sun's position and responded through its geometry. Overhangs, terraces, and carved stone ledges created shifting patterns of shade, each designed to intercept the sun at just the right moment. In the height of summer, these elements shielded walls and windows from direct exposure, reducing heat gain. As the sun moved across the sky, shade followed like a faithful companion, ensuring the home remained steady and cool. Even interior spaces reflected this mastery. Light was drawn into certain rooms and withheld from others. Courtyards glowed softly, their high walls catching the sun only at specific hours. Hallways remained dim, intentionally protected from heat so they could serve as cool retreats. The brilliance of this approach lies in its simplicity. By shaping light, they shaped temperature. No switches, no machines, just stone, shadow, and sky in perfect harmony. As we move into Chapter 8, the contrast becomes unmistakable. With all our advancements, modern homes rarely use light as a tool. Instead, they battle it. And in that battle, many of the problems we face today quietly take root. Cities have a way of gathering heat, holding it close, and releasing it slowly, long after the sun has disappeared. To live in a modern urban landscape is to live inside a vast thermal machine, one that grows hotter with each passing hour of daylight. Roads paved with dark asphalt soak up the sun like immense sponges, storing heat that radiates back into the air long after sunset. Glass towers, gleaming and spectacular from a distance, behave like giant mirrors, bouncing sunlight from one surface to another. Each reflected beam intensifies the next, creating pockets of heat that settle between buildings, trapping warmth where breeze should flow. Concrete plazas and stone sidewalks contribute to this slow building of temperature. Their surfaces absorb heat quickly and give it back reluctantly, warming the air around them in a constant cycle. Even the roads themselves generate additional heat through friction and traffic. Cars idle, engines run, and every movement adds another layer to the rising warmth that fills the city's narrow corridors. And then there are the air conditioners, thousands of them humming in windows and on rooftops. While they cool the rooms inside, they expel their captured heat directly outdoors, releasing concentrated warmth into streets and alleys already struggling to breathe. Each unit works harder as the outside temperature climbs, creating a loop in which every apartment cools itself at the expense of its neighbor. The city warms, so the machines work harder. The machines work harder, so the city warms. In this environment, your apartment becomes part of a larger organism, one that traps heat and refuses to let it go. Whether you live on the first floor or the 15th, your home is influenced by the temperature of everything around it. The building absorbs heat from its surroundings, the walls radiate it inward, and the narrow spaces between structures stifle airflow. Even at night, when the countryside cools, cities remain several degrees warmer, wrapped in the thermal residue of the day. What feels like personal discomfort is really the result of a city-wide phenomenon, a heat box built unintentionally through design choices that forgotten natural cooling. And as we look closer at the shapes and surfaces of modern buildings, we begin to see how their forms intensify this trapped warmth even more, shaping the environment in ways we rarely notice but always feel. In most modern apartments, the walls rise quickly, thin and efficient, built to meet deadlines rather than climates. At first glance, they seem sturdy enough. Smooth surfaces, sharp corners, neatly painted lines. But beneath that tidy exterior lies a hidden truth. These walls hold almost no thermal mass at all. They cannot slow heat, cannot cushion it, cannot negotiate with it the way ancient stone once did. When the sun touches them, even briefly, they react instantly. Heat doesn't wander in, it sprints. Imagine sunlight striking the side of a modern building. Instead of lingering on the surface, its warmth rushes through the thin material, spreading into the interior with surprising speed. A room that felt comfortable in the morning can become noticeably warmer by noon, and by afternoon, it may feel completely overwhelmed. The wall has no depth to absorb or delay the heat, so it passes directly into the living space, filling it like water pouring through a narrow crack. This is why temperatures inside can spike so quickly, why your home can feel fine 1 hour and oppressive the next. And the volatility doesn't end there. Just as heat enters quickly, it also leaves quickly. As the sun sets and the outside air cools, thin walls lose their warmth in the same abrupt fashion. The temperature inside drops, sometimes uncomfortably, creating a cycle of rapid rise and fall. Instead of offering steady comfort, these walls behave like hyperactive membranes, always responding, never stabilizing. The body, which prefers gentle transitions, struggles to adapt to these sudden swings. For many people, this daily roller coaster explains an experience they've never had words for. The feeling that their home is unpredictable, that comfort is fleeting, that the temperature seems to shift faster than they can adjust. It's not imagination, it's physics. These thin walls were designed for speed of construction and cost efficiency, not for climate control. They surrender to the heat almost instantly, leaving the burden of comfort entirely on mechanical systems like air conditioning. This understanding opens the door to a deeper realization. If the walls react too quickly, then what happens to the air trapped inside these sealed spaces? How does heat behave once it's already slipped past the defenses? As we move forward, we discover another hidden flaw of modern design, one that has less to do with walls themselves and more to do with the air they trap. Modern homes, for all their polished surfaces and tidy lines, often struggle with something ancient builders understood instinctively. Air needs freedom. Without a place to enter and a place to leave, it grows stagnant, it warms, it thickens. And in many contemporary apartments, airflow isn't simply ignored, it is actively prevented. Windows are placed for symmetry rather than wind. Facades are sealed for efficiency. Balconies shrink into decorative ledges, and the natural pathways that once carried breezes through a home collapse into dead ends. Step inside one of these spaces on a hot afternoon, and the sensation is immediate. The air feels still, heavy, almost reluctant to move. Even if you crack open a window, nothing stirs. There is no pressure difference to draw fresh air in, no exit point to pull warm air out. The home becomes a sealed envelope, collecting heat with each passing hour. Every breath feels thicker than the last. You can sense the claustrophobia settling in, not dramatic, but persistent, a quiet pressure that never fully lifts. Safety features meant to protect us often worsen the problem. Upper windows are fixed shut. Railings block openings. Buildings rise so closely against one another that wind cannot build momentum between them. The gentle cross breezes that once floated through courtyards and alleys are replaced by dead, unmoving pockets of warmth. Even ceiling heights in modern apartments tend to be low, leaving less room for warm air to rise away from the spaces where people live. By contrast, ancient homes welcomed air like an honored guest. They offered it shaded entry points, open courtyards, high vents, and layered rooms that guided breezes through the structure. The movement was slow, soft, and constant, refreshing without force. The result was not just cooler air, but cleaner, more breathable spaces that felt alive. Modern homes, sealed for efficiency, lose this conversation entirely. The tragedy is that many residents assume the discomfort they feel is personal, sensitivity to heat, a lack of tolerance, when in truth, it is architectural. Their homes simply cannot breathe. And when air cannot move, heat does not merely linger, it compounds. Day after day, it accumulates in walls, floors, and furnishings until the entire home feels warmer than the world outside. This brings us to the next layer of the puzzle. Heat that doesn't arrive all at once, but builds slowly, creeping into the structure until escape becomes impossible. Heat in a modern home does not arrive fresh each day. It lingers. It settles into the walls, the floors, the furniture, and the air itself. Even after sunset, when the world outside cools and the breeze finally softens, the interior remains strangely warm, as if the house refuses to let go of what it gathered during the day. This is the compound heat effect, a slow, steady accumulation that builds not just over hours but over weeks. Thin walls make the problem worse. They absorb just enough heat to raise indoor temperatures, but not enough to delay or buffer it. Instead of storing the warmth and releasing it gradually, they allow it to rush inside when the sun is strong and release it again as soon as the temperature drops outside. This constant exchange creates instability. The home warms too quickly during the day, cools too slowly at night, and never truly resets. By midsummer, the house is no longer responding to today's weather. It is responding to a season's worth of heat, stored in every surface. Floors feel warm to the touch. Bedrooms never fully cool, no matter how long the windows stay open. The walls hold a faint radiance that refuses to fade. Heat becomes cumulative, like interest accruing in a bank account you never intended to open. Air conditioning, while offering temporary relief, can make this long-term cycle worse. Each unit pulls heat from inside and pushes it outdoors, adding more warmth to the city's air. As outdoor temperatures rise, the AC must work harder. The more it runs, the more heat it expels into the environment, feeding the very system that forces people to rely on it. The result is a self-reinforcing loop. Comfort indoors creates discomfort outdoors, which drives even greater dependence indoors. For many residents, the frustration is familiar. The home feels hotter in July than it did in June, even though the weather hasn't changed dramatically. Nights offer little escape. Lowering the thermostat brings only temporary comfort. The house has accumulated warmth like a sponge soaking up water drop by drop. But this problem is not inevitable. It is a symptom of design choices that ignored natural principles known for thousands of years. And as we move into Chapter 9, we begin to rediscover the wisdom that ancient builders used instinctively, lessons that can still guide us today, if we choose to relearn them. In a world obsessed with sleek surfaces and rapid construction, the idea of bringing weight back into our homes may feel counterintuitive. Yet thermal mass, the ancient secret that kept stone houses cool, can return to modern living without turning every building into a fortress. The wisdom of heavy materials is not nostalgia. It is practicality rediscovered. And it doesn't require rebuilding cities from scratch. It simply requires rethinking what we put inside our walls. Imagine a home where 1 or 2 interior walls are made of stone, brick, or compressed earth, quietly absorbing heat during the day and releasing it gently at night. These materials don't need to dominate the entire structure. Even a single mass wall can stabilize temperature in the surrounding rooms. Floors made from ceramic tile, stone, or dense concrete can store coolness overnight, buffering against daytime heat. A hybrid system, light materials for structure, heavy materials for climate, can transform comfort without altering appearance. Earth plasters, long forgotten, can return as beautiful finishes that not only add texture but store and release moisture, subtly cooling the air. Thick tile floors can be paired with natural ventilation to create cycles of cooling similar to those in ancient courtyards. Decorative stone surfaces, once used only for aesthetic value, can become functional elements that regulate temperature across the day. Even modern materials can mimic the effect. Phase-change plasters and engineered bricks can store and release thermal energy like their ancient counterparts. This shift doesn't abandon modern design, it deepens it. Clean lines, minimalist spaces, and contemporary layouts can coexist with the weight of thermal mass. The future need not look like the past, but it can borrow the parts of the past that worked. In fact, many architects are discovering that adding mass reduces energy demand, stabilizes indoor climates, and creates a sense of grounded calm that lightweight materials struggle to provide. The beauty of thermal mass is its quietness. It does not hum, it does not break, it does not require electricity. It simply exists, responding to heat with patience, turning homes into steady, reliable environments, no matter how hot the summer becomes. And once we understand how weight can stabilize temperature, the next natural question emerges. How do we help air move through these spaces as gracefully as it once did? Thermal mass is only half the story. The other half is breath. In many modern apartments, the air feels as though it has been paused, motionless, waiting for an invitation it never receives. Yet airflow is not a decorative feature or a nostalgic remnant of old architecture. It is essential. The body depends on fresh air the way the mind depends on quiet. When a home cannot breathe, neither can the people inside it. Reintroducing the breeze does not require rebuilding entire cities. It begins with simple, intentional openings that allow air to travel the way it naturally wants to move. Reversible windows are one of the easiest ways to restore this lost dialogue between inside and out. Tilted inward at the top, they let warm air escape without creating harsh drafts. Swung open from the side, they welcome breezes when the weather is forgiving. Stacked openings, one high, one low, create pressure differences that gently pull cool air in and push warm air out. Even a narrow upper vent paired with a ground-level window can wake a stagnant room from its stillness. Wind corridors work on a larger scale. By aligning openings along the direction of prevailing breezes, a home can harness natural airflow without a single mechanical device. This doesn't demand vast renovations. Sometimes repositioning a balcony door, widening an interior archway, or adding a transom window is enough to create a soft, consistent current. When air senses a path, it follows it. When the path is blocked, it turns heavy and stale. Breathable facades, walls designed with small openings, lattices, or permeable materials, can also revive the airflow that older homes once enjoyed. Traditional mashrabiyah screens, perforated brickwork, or modern breathable cladding systems allow air to filter inward while still preserving privacy and shade. These features calm the intensity of sunlight and carry coolness into the rooms behind them, creating pockets of freshness even in dense neighborhoods. Even interior spaces can participate. Open floor plans, glass partitions with vents, and corridors aligned with exterior windows give air room to move. The breeze does not need much, only a beginning and an end. A single open path can change a home's entire climate. When a home breathes again, temperatures stabilize, humidity eases, and the mind grows quieter. The contrast with sealed living is immediate and unmistakable. And once air is restored to its rightful place in the design of a home, another question arises. How can we shape sunlight with the same precision, guiding warmth and brightness as ancient builders once did? Sunlight is not the enemy modern design often makes it out to be. It is a powerful partner, warm, bright, and predictable, waiting to be shaped with intention. Ancient builders knew this instinctively. They didn't hide from the sun, they guided it. And today, with just a few thoughtful adjustments, modern homes can do the same. Small shifts in how light enters a space can transform heat from a burden into a controlled, gentle presence. Shading screens are one of the simplest ways to begin. Inspired by designs found throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East, screens filter light the way leaves filter sunlight through a tree canopy. The rays enter softened, scattered, stripped of their intensity. The heat stays outside, while the interior fills with a calm, patterned glow. No machinery, no effort, just a delicate boundary between brightness and shadow. Angled balconies offer another layer of control. A balcony tilted slightly upward or outward can block harsh overhead sun, while still allowing indirect light to spill into the home. In summer, when the sun travels high, these angles create a natural shield. In winter, when the sun hangs low, the light slips beneath the balcony edge and warms the interior again. A simple tilt becomes a seasonal strategy. Exterior shutters, rare in modern cities, were once essential tools for temperature control. Closed during the hottest hours, they prevented heat from touching the window glass at all. Opened in the morning or evening, they welcomed light and air in perfect measure. Deep window frames, carved into thick walls or built out with modern materials, offer similar benefits. They create shade pockets, cooling the air before it steps inside. Even a few inches of depth can turn a window into a tiny climate buffer. These solutions remind us that sunlight does not need to be banished. It needs guidance. A home that tames sunlight through thoughtful design can remain bright without overheating, shaded without feeling dark. The shift is subtle, but the effect is profound. Interiors become calmer, temperatures more stable, and mornings and afternoons feel distinct again. For the design lover, These changes offer elegance as well as comfort. For the practical homeowner, they offer simplicity and efficiency. And for everyone who has ever felt overwhelmed by the summer sun, they offer a return to control. Now, with thermal mass restored, breezes revived, and sunlight guided, we step into the final question. How do these ancient lessons shape the future of building? And what might our homes look like if we finally blend old wisdom with new possibility? The movement toward passive cooling is not a nostalgic return to the past. It is a quiet revolution shaped by urgency, creativity, and a renewed respect for the rhythms of the natural world. As temperatures rise and cities grow hotter, architects and engineers are looking backward to move forward, rediscovering principles that kept homes comfortable long before electricity existed. In design studios and research labs across the world, a new truth is taking shape. The most advanced buildings of the future may echo the oldest ones. Imagine cities where walls are built with layered materials, light outside, heavy inside, allowing thermal mass to regulate indoor temperatures with steadiness that machines can't replicate. Picture new neighborhoods where buildings face the wind, not the street, where windows stretch deep into the wall, where shutters respond to the sun like eyelids adjusting to brightness. With every rediscovered technique, modern design becomes a little less mechanized, a little more alive. Engineers are blending ancient logic with innovative materials, breathable concrete, phase change panels that store heat like stone, smart facades that adjust themselves to sunlight. These aren't relics, they're evolutions. And the twist is almost poetic. The future that once dreamed in steel and glass now leans toward clay, stone, lime, timber, shadow, and breeze. The sleek silhouettes of skyscrapers still rise, but their skins begin to mimic ancient cooling strategies. Some cities experiment with narrow alleys to funnel wind, others with rooftop gardens to shade entire blocks. Architects study old villages, not for their charm, but for their climate genius. What once looked rustic now looks visionary. Homeowners, too, are part of this shift. They install interior stone walls for thermal stability, add shady overhangs to tame sunlight, and rediscover the simple power of cross-ventilation. They learn that comfort need not come from machines alone, that a home can breathe with them, cool with them, and adapt with them. These changes, small at first, ripple into something larger, a cultural shift away from sealing ourselves off from nature and toward forming alliances with it again. In this emerging vision, the home becomes a companion rather than a container. It works with the night, speaks with the sun, and listens to the wind. And as we move into the final chapter, a more philosophical question rises from the quiet. If ancient homes were built with such harmony, what deeper wisdom do they carry about living, not just cooling, in a world that often feels overheated in more ways than one? Old stone houses have a way of settling into the landscape, as if time itself built them rather than human hands. They stand through centuries of heat, storms, and changing civilizations, yet inside they remain calm. Their endurance is not an accident. These homes were shaped with an understanding of the world that went beyond shelter. They were built to cooperate with their surroundings, to welcome the seasons instead of resisting them, and to offer comfort without demanding anything in return. In their silence, they reveal something modern structures often forget. Longevity is not about strength alone, it is about harmony. When you step into one of these homes, you feel that intention in the cool air, the soft light, the steady quiet. The walls do not strain under the sun. They absorb and negotiate with it. The floors do not surrender to heat. They hold the night's coolness like a memory. Every part of the structure seems to know its purpose. These houses still stand because they were not merely constructed, they were understood. Their builders observed the land, the wind, the rhythms of the climate, and shaped the home to fit within those patterns, not above them. Their survival across centuries is a testament to this relationship. Empires collapsed, materials evolved, technologies rose and faded, but the stone homes persisted because they required so little to endure. No electricity, no machines, only the continued presence of the earth and sky they were designed to work with. They were homes that belonged to their time, yet somehow belonged to all times. They aged without failing, adapting quietly as generations passed through their doors. There is reverence in realizing this. These structures hold the echo of lives lived slowly, attentively, in tune with daylight and temperature, shadow and breeze. They remind us that comfort was once crafted through patience, not power, through understanding, not resistance. They stand as monuments to a kind of wisdom that modern architecture often overlooks, that a home can be both deeply rooted and deeply alive. And as we look to these enduring shelters, another question rises, one not about stone or climate, but about people. If these homes were shaped to belong to their centuries, what does it mean for us, who live in faster, hotter, more restless worlds? What do these houses teach us about how humans once lived, and perhaps how we are meant to live still? In the end, people are not searching for cooler rooms. They are searching for something much deeper. Beneath the frustration of summer heat and the longing for relief lies a quieter desire, the wish to feel calm inside one's own home. Modern apartments, with their thin walls, buzzing machines, and shifting temperatures, rarely offer this. Even when the air conditioner hums steadily, the mind seldom rests. Comfort becomes a battle rather than a natural state. The home, meant to be a sanctuary, begins to feel like another source of noise and tension. What most people crave is not merely cold air, but groundedness, a sense that the space around them will hold steady, even when life does not. Old stone houses provided this effortlessly. Their thick walls absorbed sound as well as heat. Their dimmer light softened the nervous system. Their slow response to temperature shifts mirrored the slow breathing of a resting body. These homes didn't just cool people, they calmed them. They offered a sensory environment where nothing felt rushed, where the world outside could rage with heat or storms, and the interior would remain unchanged. Modern living, by contrast, often feels emotionally unstable. The glare of light bouncing off smooth surfaces, the echo of footsteps in hollow rooms, the constant rise and fall of indoor temperatures, all of it keeps the mind slightly alert, unable to settle. Technology may create comfort on paper, but emotional comfort is something older, simpler, and harder to manufacture. It's the feeling of walls that hold silence, of rooms that stay cool without machinery, of a home that doesn't demand constant adjustment or vigilance. When people say they want a cooler home, what they often mean is they want a space that feels safe. A space where the body can relax without anticipating the next blast of heat or the next mechanical whir. A space that feels connected to the rhythms of the earth rather than insulated from them. Ancient homes provided this naturally because they were built in partnership with the land. Modern homes often miss it because they were built in defiance of it. As we approach the final reflections of this documentary, one truth becomes clear. The wisdom of old stone houses is not just architectural, it is human. Their comfort speaks to something timeless in us, something we continue to seek even as we fill our homes with screens and machines. And this leads us toward the final understanding of what these ancient walls have been whispering all along. Old stone walls have a way of speaking without sound. Stand beside them long enough, and you begin to feel the quiet lessons woven into their foundations. Lessons not only about cooling or comfort, but about living at a different pace. These homes were shaped by hands that watched the world carefully. They were built slowly, with patience, with a sensitivity to land and season that seems foreign in modern life. Their wisdom is not loud or technical. It is quiet, steady, and deeply human. The way these walls handle heat is only one part of their story. They teach restraint, taking only what the land can offer, resisting the urge to fight the sun or wind, choosing instead to guide them gently. They teach observation, knowing where shadows fall, how breezes shift, how earth cools at night. But perhaps most of all, they teach presence. A stone home does not demand constant adjustment or attention. It does not buzz, blink, or whir. It invites stillness. Inside these spaces, time feels slower, as if the house itself encourages you to breathe more deeply, to let your thoughts quieten, to listen. Modern life often moves too quickly to notice such things. We rush, we react, we adjust thermostats and toggle switches, trying to force our environment into obedience. But ancient homes show another possibility. That comfort and meaning can arise not from control, but from cooperation. The walls hold memory, the memory of nights cooled by moonlight, of summers softened by shade, of generations living with the land rather than against it. To enter one of these homes is to step into the lingering presence of people who understood the world through attention rather than acceleration. And though we have moved on technologically, these walls remain, whispering a reminder that the natural world is not an enemy to be resisted, but a partner to be understood. They remind us that true comfort is not just the absence of heat, but the presence of harmony. They show that a home can be a refuge without isolating us from the earth beneath it or the sky above it. As we approach the closing message of this journey, the question becomes unavoidable. If these ancient walls still hold such wisdom, what might happen if we began listening again? If we allowed their quiet guidance to shape not only our buildings, but our way of being in the world? As this journey draws to a close, a quiet realization settles in. Everything we have sought from modern comfort, cooler rooms, calmer spaces, steadier temperatures, and a deeper sense of ease, was discovered long before our era of machines. It lived in the stones of ancient homes, in their patient designs, and their effortless partnership with the land. The science of thermal mass, the art of airflow, the choreography of shade, the wisdom of night cooling, all of these threads weave together into a single truth. Our ancestors built not just shelters, but environments tuned to human well-being. Modern discomfort often feels like a problem of technology, yet the roots lie in our forgetting. We moved away from the rhythms of nature, sealed our walls, flattened our roofs, and quieted the breeze. We chased progress without noticing what was quietly lost along the way. But the answers were always inside the walls, waiting, unchanged, for us to notice them again. When we look at an old stone house now, it no longer appears primitive or outdated. It looks intelligent. It looks intentional. It looks like a reminder that comfort does not have to be engineered by force. It can be shaped gently, thoughtfully, in harmony with the world around us. There is something profoundly hopeful in that truth. It means our path forward is not mysterious. It means the way back to balance is already known. The future of home building may involve new materials and new technologies, but its wisdom will come from something ancient, a respect for the climate we live in, and a willingness to work with it rather than against it. And as cities warm, as summers lengthen, as the air grows still and heavy, this wisdom becomes more than nostalgic. It becomes necessary, not as a step backward, but as a step home. Because to return to the lessons of stone is not to abandon progress. It is to rediscover a deeper form of intelligence, one that understands the earth beneath us, the sky above us, and the quiet needs of the human heart. And perhaps that is the final understanding this story offers. That home is not the place that shields us from nature. It is the place that teaches us how to live within it, comfortably, calmly, and with a sense of belonging we have too long forgotten.